Hello, everyone. It is 11 a.m. on Sunday, September 24. We are here with Eileen Maddox. She is a recurring guest, and as a matter of just historical purposes, if you're interested, please take a look at some of the videos online we have with Clearwater Baha'is featuring Eileen Maddox. Just a quick introduction. The subject today is 1 Daniel, chapter 1 of Daniel. The prophet Daniel is among the Hebrew prophets because he gave 5 time-specific prophecies, time-specific to the year, and 3 of them were about the Bahá'í Faith. In addition, he gave 2 nesting prophecies, prophecies nested within each other. He also interpreted a dream of King Nebudchadnezzar that has implications for us today. The hourglass is pouring from the old world order to the new one. Join us to explore how God spoke through Daniel to us over 2.5 millennia ago. Just a quick introduction about Miss Eileen Maddox. She grew up in Maine and graduated from the University of Kansas with a liberal arts degree. She was a seeker half her life until she discovered and embraced the Bahá'í Faith. And when first introduced to the Bahá'í Faith, she was seized by the fact that God has always been active in human history, that God had always sent prophets of God. He had sent many of them to educate humanity. Having majored in history during her university studies, Eileen was astonished to realize that the single most important factor in human history, God and his prophets, was not recognized by professional historians. She served at the Baha'i World Center in Haifa, Israel, for 16 years in positions that required extensive research and writing. At this point, Eileen is now an independent researcher and writer who describes herself as a curious student. Just a quick shout out to her books. Her first book, 1844, Convergence and Prophecy for Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and the Baha'i Faith, was published in 2018. This book covered the Millerite movement and Adventism of the 19th century. Her current project is finishing the trilogy, The Coming of the Glory, how the Hebrew scriptures reveal the plan of God. And this presents a Baha'i perspective of the Hebrew Bible and its prophecies and its importance for us today. You can find this by searching online on Amazon.com. You can purchase these books online, written by Eileen Maddox, and you can discover this for yourself. Further, there are videos, as I mentioned just a few moments ago, there are videos you can find online on YouTube, where Clearwater Baha'is is a search term. Just search Clearwater Baha'is, and you'll find a few of Eileen Maddox's videos that discuss the Hebrew prophets, and it really puts in perspective a lot that we're going to talk about today as well. That being said, we welcome you, Eileen. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you everyone here on the Zoom session that we're here today together to discuss this subject. Just one little thing before we get started. I understand that we're going to be taking a couple breaks through the session today, and in those breaks, we can ask questions. So please type your question in the meeting chat here on Zoom. Raise your hand, please, so it's easier to call on you. And when the break comes, we will open for questioning. Thank you so much. Eileen, we are ready to go.
Okay, John, thank you very much. And I am very happy to be back on Clearwater. I love doing programs on Clearwater. And today we'll explore the prophet Daniel. Now, Daniel has been much misunderstood over the ages. And in the spirit of full disclosure, it's important to note that the book of Daniel is not regarded by many scholars as a reliable guide to history. And the broad consensus is that Daniel is not a historical figure, that his book is an apocalypse, not a book of true prophecy, although it features prophecies. but is connected to the persecution of the Jews by the Greeks in the 2nd century BC. I disagree, although I wouldn't argue with anyone, but you'll see why as we go along. I suspect that Daniel was a historical figure, whether he was a composite or what, that he did exist. I also caution that the book of Daniel is a lifelong study, and some of it is intertwined with sections from the books of Ezekiel and Revelation. So, and we're not going there today. I'm going to try to keep on a narrow path here and keep this as simple as possible. Okay. I forgot to share screen, so I think I had better share the screen. Okay. I, Daniel. Welcome to I, Daniel, which is how he often referred to himself. We're going to explore Daniel from a Baha'i perspective. We're going to start with a dream that I have named 4 Kingdoms and a Fifth. And after presenting the dream, we'll stop for a short Q&A. But before we start, I'll present the guidelines as I understand them for all biblical study and prophecies. Oh, and the reason for the short Q&A is to simply separate this particular dream from the 5 prophecies that come later, because this is pretty heavy material that we're going to be covering, and I'm going to make it as easy on you as I can. Prophecy involves what I call divine time. How can anyone know the future? Well, it's like this. Abdu'l-Baha said, in the world of God, there is no past, present, or future. All of these are one. Now, that is something to ponder on. And Abdu'l-Baha sympathized with our problem of understanding the idea of no past, present, or future. After all, our lives are based on clocks and calendars that tell us in no uncertain terms that the past is over, the present is now, and the future is still to come. However, Abdu'l-Baha explained, know that it is one of the most abstruse questions of divinity, that the world of existence, that is this endless universe, has no beginning. Feel comforted that Abdu'l-Baha understands how difficult and mysterious this is for us. Abdu'l-Baha also said, observe that the body of man abides in a limited space, but the spirit of man traverses all countries and regions, and even the limitless expanse of the heavens. It encompasses all existence and makes discoveries in the spheres above and in the infinite reaches of the universe. And the prophet Isaiah said, I make known the end from the beginning, from ancient times, what is still to come. Now, Isaiah was the prophet who saw the Lord seated on a throne, and above him were seraphim, the highest order of angels in the traditional hierarchy of angelology, each with 6 wings. This was during Isaiah's call to serve the Lord. The seraphim were calling to one another, holy, 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 the Lord Almighty, the whole earth is full of his glory. And there's a beautiful hymn written to those words too. So let's look at the guidelines, all the rules and regs for biblical interpretation. The words of God have innumerable significances and mysteries of meanings, each one 1,000 and more. Okay, that's another reason I'll never get into any kind of argument about what a biblical verse might mean, because everyone could be right. Ponder a bit about the 1,000 and more. I think the words of God are like an expanding time capsule. As we progress in understanding, we understand the next layer, and then the next. And Abdu'l-Baha gave a lot of commentary on the Hebrew Bible in some answered questions, and a long one, several pages, was on Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And at the end of that, he said, this is but one of the meanings of the biblical account of Adam. Reflect on it that you may discover the others. So I guess you might say, I live a life of reflection, and I love it. Back to the prophet Daniel in 605 AD, which was 19 years before the destruction of Jerusalem and the Babylonian exile, a young man named Daniel was taken with many other young men from Jerusalem to Babylon to be trained to serve the royal court of Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel was steadfast in his observance of the laws of Moses and the worship of the one God, although he lived the rest of his long life in the polytheistic Babylonian culture. He served King Nebudchadnezzar, and then King Belshazzar, and even King Cyrus the Great. He lived through momentous events of his time: the conquest of Judah by the Babylonians, the exile, the conquest of Babylon by the Persian Empire, and the reign of Cyrus the Great. We will first examine one dream from a Baha'i perspective, and then stop for a few minutes of Q&A before moving on to Daniel's 5 time-specific prophecies and visions. So feel free to put questions in the chat box as we go along. The dream of a huge statue was actually Nebuchadnezzar's dream, not Daniel's. According to what was recorded in the book of Daniel, the dream was worrisome to Nebuchadnezzar, and he demanded that his court astrologers and soothsayers describe the dream first, and then interpret it, or die. Okay, only Daniel was able to do this. As he explained to Nebuchadnezzar, the secret which the king hath demanded cannot the wise men, astrologers, magicians, the soothsayers, show unto the king. But there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. The latter days is a hint that the dream's interpretation would go beyond the traditional rendition of 4 ancient kingdoms. The latter days is a hint. It's like a code. The phrase the latter days is a code for the transition between the Adamic cycle and the cycle of fulfillment, the Baha'i cycle. In 1844, of course, was the hinge between those 2 cycles. Now, the statue, it had a head of gold, shoulders and arms of silver, belly and thighs of brass, and legs of iron, and feet of iron and clay. Then Daniel moved to the following 2 verses about Nebuchadnezzar's dream that are sometimes overlooked. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were all broken to pieces and became like chaff on a threshing floor in the summer. The winds swept them away without leaving a trace. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. This last sentence gives us a lot to ponder. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. A mountain can represent, among a lot of other things, it can represent a religion that has stood the test of time. It can represent an institution, such as a governing system. Daniel said that it would fill the whole earth. Well, in my opinion, the Bahá'í Faith covers both the religion and filling the whole earth in time, eventually, according to the plan of God. The traditional interpretation of the four kingdoms is that Babylonia was the first, the Medes and Persians the second, the Greeks the third, and the Romans the fourth. The Roman Empire was the most successful in terms of its longevity in the immense areas it governed. It lasted 1,000 years or so, give or take. The Roman Empire was divided by the end of the 4th century AD into the Eastern, ruled from Byzantium, Constantinople, and the Western, ruled from Rome. Western Christian civilization emerged from the Roman Empire, as we all know, and was plagued, Western civilization, that is, was plagued for many centuries by religious warfare and persecutions. Christians awaited the 5th kingdom, the kingdom of God, to be brought by the Prince of Peace, as foretold by Isaiah. At the end times, the latter days, or the end of the world, as they sometimes saw it. But there are more clues, Daniel said, and just as he saw the iron mixed with baked clay, so the people will be a mixture and will not remain united any more than iron mixes with clay. And in the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of a mountain, but not by human hands. A rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold to pieces. The great God has shown the king what will take place in the future. Okay, what kingdom can never be destroyed? It's the kingdom of God, no matter how people might fight it. The kingdom of God that Jesus taught. The mention of the latter days suggests the revelation of Baha'u'llah will be the means whereby the kingdom of God is hastened to earth. Hastened. It's already here for a few people in some ways, but it will be accelerated. Now, remember when Abdu'l-Baha exhorted us to look for additional meanings beyond what he said? The Baha'i scholar Robert Riggs approached Nebuchadnezzar's statue as representing 4 eras of human civilizations in Babylon, rather than kingdoms. The Gold Era. At one time, Mesopotamia had the most advanced civilization on earth, the result of the coming of the prophet Adam. Volume 1 of my book explains how the spiritual springtime came to Mesopotamia after the advent of the prophet Adam, about 4000 BC. Again, give or take. Babylon was visited by the Greek historian Herodotus in the 5th century, who described it as a city with such magnificence that none can approach it. The silver, Persian. Cyrus the Great, who in 539 BC conquered Babylon and the Babylonians. The Persians took over the Babylonian Empire. The Bronze Era, Greco-Roman. Riggs combines the Greek and Roman empires. And with Alexander the Great in the 4th century, Greece conquered Persian Babylon. The Romans conquered the Greeks. Now, Babylon had been deteriorating for centuries. And by this time, no one in Babylon had retained the knowledge of how to repair the ziggurats, the temples that were crumbling. And they just continued to crumble. And the Iron Era, which Robert Riggs emphasizes the Islamic conquests of the 7th century AD. The invincible Arabian warriors swept over the known world, and most of Mesopotamia was in the hands of the Muslim Caliphate by 633 AD. And Jerusalem, Palestine, and most of the Persian Empire soon fell to the Muslim armies. Iron mixed with clay. This could represent the split within Islam, the breaking of Muhammad's covenant that led to Shias and Sunnis and other sects. Islam reached high civilizational advancement, had a civilization golden age for several centuries, but the empire was brutal because it was divided by sects, like iron mixed with clay and broke into many pieces. Ancient Babylon was a ruin. Baghdad was built on its ruins. And we are living today, in my opinion, in the days of iron mixed with clay. The feet of our civilization are crumbling for all the reasons that we probably recognize and agree on, and that I won't bother to list. Robert Riggs wrote, during the reign of the 4th kingdom, and as the Iron Era draws to a close in Daniel's interpretation, the final kingdom of divine origin is represented by a stone hewn from a mountain. A mountain has often represented a religion in sacred literature, while a stone may represent truth. In ancient times, and even in some areas of today's world, stones from heaven, meteorites, have become objects of reverence, and the Kaaba at Mecca still contains such a stone that was revered even before Muhammad's time. And Riggs summarizes, the symbol is appropriate and describes the Bahá'í revelation that was hewn from the faith, the mountain of the Baal. The stone struck the weakest foot of the Muslim world, the iron mixed with clay, that symbolizes the Shia tradition centered in modern Iran. Daniel goes on to prophesy that this stone will itself become a great mountain that will shatter all the other kingdoms and will endure forever. Riggs says the meaning is clear. The Bahá'í Faith will inevitably become a great religion that will transcend all others, both in spiritual power and in duration. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. And open it up to questions and answers. Okay. Do we have anything in the chat box, John? I can't see the chat box at this moment.
We have a question from Norbert. It says, how long do scholars estimate Daniel lived?
How long ago?
Nope. How long do scholars estimate Daniel lived?
He lived into his 80s. If you figure that in 605, he was a young lad, maybe 16, 17 years old, and he lived to serve King Cyrus, at least according to the book of Daniel. He lived a very long life, and most of his visions seem to have come later in life also. And also, please tell the person who asked about electronic copies. Yes, there will be electronic copies of the book offered during the pre-order sale, and the Kindle editions will probably be free. Are there any other questions about this particular dream?
Yes. Sandra has a question. She raised her hand, and also she wrote the question. Sandra, while you're unmuting, does the gold and silver, etc., imply anything regarding worth? Do we see Mesopotamia as a golden age?
Mesopotamia was the divine springtime after the coming of the prophet Adam. And the Bahá'í Faith recognizes Adam as the first of the prophets sent from God for that cycle, called the Adamic cycle, Adam through Muhammad. Yes, Mesopotamia was the spiritual springtime, and its development was like crazy fast. It went through Neolithic villages to grand cities within 1,000 years or so, and then kept on going. And the list of inventions that came out of Mesopotamia is really mind-numbing. So yes, that the golden head was the golden age of Mesopotamian culture.
So, if I may, so does the silver, the brass, the iron, do those imply lesser civilizations?
Yes. Well, that's a very good question. In some ways, today, we are the most civilizationally advanced ever in human history. But we are also very divided, and we are very vulnerable to a lot of really bad things happening, like nuclear war. Sure, the Mesopotamians did not split the atom. We did that in the modern age, but look where it has brought us. So that's really the meaning of the feet of bronze, and then the bronze and the clay crumbling. Civilizational crumbling is what that means.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll go back to new share then and see if I can do this. Okay, can you see that?
Yes, we see your PowerPoint. So if you start from current.
Okay. Okay, we're back in business. I, Daniel, we're going to cover his 5 time-specific prophecies and the nested prophecies within them. Now, his 5 time-specific prophecies were accurate to the year, and no other Hebrew prophet had done that. Daniel was the only one. That sounds great, but these prophecies couldn't be understood when they were given, especially since 2 of them were sealed until the end of time. However, in hindsight, they are a mind-blowing example of divine time, of past, present, and future rolled into one. And since these prophecies couldn't be understood until after they were fulfilled, to me, that means that they were meant for us, not for the people of Daniel's time. And Daniel's prophecies also contain nested prophecies. So it's like a two in one, resting inside like a Russian doll. Now, divine time means no time as we understand it, but time still has to be counted in the Bible. How? First, a day equals a year. A year equals 360 days, and a time equals a year. And this biblical numerical code is essential for deciphering the days and years in Daniel's time prophecies. And where does the counting start from? From the Edict of Artaxerxes in 457 BC, a century after Daniel died, and many centuries before the prophesied events occurred. This edict gave permission for the rebuilding of Jerusalem. Abdu'l-Baha confirmed in some answered questions that 457 BC was the correct starting date for counting. He wrote, what Daniel intended is the 3rd edict, which was issued in 457 BC. Now, this is a nested prophecy. This edict issued, at least 100 years after Daniel died, and providing the code for biblical counting. Now, we're going to present 5 prophecies. They will scramble your brain a bit, and we're going to try to keep them separate and use place cards to help keep them straight. And we're going to present them in chronological order, not in the order that Daniel gave them, but in the chronological order of the dates of their fulfillment. Here's the first one. Daniel was in distress. He was distraught that Jerusalem had been conquered by the Babylonians and the Israelites had been sent into exile. He turned to the Lord in prayer and meditation, in fasting and in sackcloth and ashes. He abjectly confessed his people's sins and rebellion, that they had not listened to the Lord's servants, the prophets, and now they were scattered because of their unfaithfulness to the Lord. Lord, listen. Forgive, Lord. Hear and act. For your sake, my God, do not delay, because your city and your people bear your name. While Daniel was praying, the angel Gabriel came to him. Daniel, I have now come to give you insight and understanding. As soon as you began to pray, a word went out, which I have come to tell you, for you are highly esteemed. Therefore, consider the word and understand the vision. The 77s are presented in two ways. As 77s, that is a week, 7 days, for 490 years, and as 7 plus 62 plus 1 for 490 days. They're both the same. 77s are decreed for your people and your holy city to finish transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for wickedness, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. Know and understand this. From the time the word goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the anointed one, the ruler, comes, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. The anointed one will be put to death and will have nothing. The people of the ruler who will come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end will come like a flood. War will continue until the end, and desolations have been decreed. He will confirm a covenant for many, for 1 7. That is the last week of Jesus' life. In the middle of the 7, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering. That is at the time of the crucifixion. And at the temple, he will set up an abomination that causes desolation until the end that is decreed is poured out on him. Okay, that is a mouthful. According to the Gospel of Matthew, the temple curtain was rent from top to bottom when Jesus breathed his last, which would have been halfway through the last 7 of the last week. The rituals of the temple sacrifice have been abrogated by Jesus' sacrifice for mankind. Jesus was 33 at the time of his martyrdom, which took place halfway through the last 7. Christians believe that it was a bodily resurrection at the end of that 7, and Baha'is believe that it was a spiritual reawakening on the part of Jesus's followers. Okay, here's the math. The 77s, 490 days, 33 AD, 70 weeks equals 490 days and years. Subtract 490 from 457 BC and you get 33 AD, which was the date of the martyrdom of Jesus. What Daniel intended is the third edict, which was issued in 457 BC. Therefore, 490 days is 490 years. The third edict of Artaxerxes was issued 457 years before the birth of Christ, and Christ was 33 years old at the time of his martyrdom and ascension. 33 added to 457 is 490, which is the time announced by Daniel for the advent of Christ. And this is from Abdul Baha. Our second place card. And I call these prophecies of hope because even though some of them do sound dire, there is hope. There are many reasons for us to have hope. The second prophecy, the 2,300 days and years. Now, this one goes on and on and on and on. And I will keep it as simple as possible. Daniel saw himself in the citadel of Susa, called Shushan, here on the map, by the Ulai River in the province of Elam, Persia. The prophet Jeremiah had prophesied that God would set his throne in Elam, destroy her authorities, and then restore her fortunes. Susa was once the capital of Elam, but it is now a mound for archaeologists. In the 19th century, Shiraz was the birthplace of the Bab and the major city of Elam. And here's an enlargement map. And here, Susa, in the province of Elam. You can see it was pretty close to Babylon. And the Persian Empire came right up to the Tigris River, which was the boundary with the Babylonians. Okay, this vision, we are going to keep this short. Daniel saw a ram with two long horns. A powerful ram charged west, north, and south, then a goat with one horn. Between its eyes came from the west, crossing the whole earth without touching the ground. It charged the ram in great rage and shattered its two horns. The goat trampled the defeated ram, and none could rescue it. The goat became very great, but at the height of its power, the large horn was broken off, and in its place, 4 prominent horns grew up to the 4 winds of heaven. Out of one of the goat's horns came another that grew in power to the south and to the east towards the beautiful land, the Holy Land. Daniel's vision continued about this last horn as follows. It grew until it reached the host of the heavens, and it threw some of the starry hosts down to the earth and trampled on them. It set itself up to be as great as the commander of the army of the Lord. It took away the daily sacrifice from the Lord, and his sanctuary was thrown down. Because of rebellion, the Lord's people and the daily sacrifice were given over to it. It prospered in everything it did, and truth was thrown to the ground. This sounds very dire. This sounds like the proverbial fight between good and evil. Then I, Daniel, heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to him, how long will it take for the vision to be fulfilled? The vision concerning the daily sacrifice, the rebellion that causes desolation, the surrender of the sanctuary, and the trampling underfoot of the Lord's people. He said to me, it will take 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary will be reconsecrated. While I, Daniel, was watching the vision and trying to understand it, there before me stood one who looked like a man, and I heard a man's voice from the Ulai calling, Gabriel, tell this man the meaning of the vision. As he came near the palace where I was standing, I was terrified and fell prostrate. Son of man, he said, understand that this vision concerns the time of the end. Gabriel raised him up and said, I am going to tell you what will happen later in the time of wrath, because the vision concerns the appointed time of the end. The 2-horned ram that you saw represents the kings of Media and Persia. The shaggy goat is the king of Greece, and the large horn between its eyes is the first king. The 4 horns that replaced the one that was broken off represent 4 kingdoms that will emerge from this nation, but will not have the same power. And here we get a hint of a repeat of the 4 kingdoms theme. Also the fracturing of iron and clay, as Robert Riggs saw it. And this is described next. In the latter part of their reign, when rebels have become completely wicked, a fierce-looking king, a master of intrigue, will arise. He will become very strong, but not by his own power. He will cause astounding devastation and will succeed in whatever he does. He will destroy those who are mighty, the holy people. He will cause deceit to prosper. He will consider himself superior. When they feel secure, he will destroy many and take his stand against the prince of princes. Yet he will be destroyed, but not by human power. Okay, I tend to think that this master of intrigue may be a collective force, not just one individual person. And who is the Prince of Princes? I couldn't find an authoritative reference to the Prince of Princes, not using that particular title. Was it Baha'u'llah? We'll know more in hindsight, even though we are living in the end times. Daniel was utterly confused. None of this made sense to him, and it wasn't supposed to make sense to him. He was told the vision of the evenings and mornings that has been given you is true, but seal up the vision, for it concerns the distant future. Okay, here's the math. 2,300 days, years, it comes to 1844. And if you take 2,300 solar years minus 457, you get 1844. 1844, of course, was the year of the expected Qiyam in Shia Islam, the year of the expected return of Jesus Christ in Protestantism, especially in the Millerite movement, the declaration of the Bab, and the birth of Baha'u'llah, Abdul-Baha, the birth of Abdul-Baha, and the end of the Adamic cycle, 6,000 years, in the beginning of the cycle of fulfillment, 500,000 years, the Baha'i cycle. And I do have the 6,000 years documented in my book. It is in the Baha'i writings, but I can't go back and pull it right now. Briefly, said Abdul-Baha, the point is that he, Gabriel, fixes a period of 2,300 years. Therefore, from the date of the edict to rebuild Jerusalem until the day of the birth of Christ, there are 456 years. And from the birth of Christ until the day of the advent of the Bab, there are 1,844 years. And if 456 years are added to this number, it makes 2,300 years. That is to say, the fulfillment of the vision of Daniel took place in AD 1844. And this is the year of the advent of the Bab. Examine the text of the book of Daniel and observe how clearly he fixes the year of his advent. There could indeed be no clearer prophecy for a manifestation than this. Abdul-Baha went on to say that in Matthew, Christ clearly says that what Daniel meant by this prophecy was the date of the advent. And this is the verse. As he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, "Tell us, when shall these things be? And when and what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world?" Among the words he uttered in reply were the following: "When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand. Thus he referred them to the 8th chapter of the book of Daniel, implying that whoever reads it should grasp when that time shall be. Consider how clearly the advent of the Bab has been specified in the Torah and the Gospel. And here is our third place card. The third prophecy called a time, times, and half a time. Again, Daniel had been praying in mourning about the plight of the Israelites when a man clothed in linen with fine gold appeared. Linen cloth is a sign of purity. His body was like beryl, which is a translucent mineral, and his face as the appearance of lightning, and his eyes as lamps of fire, and his arms and his feet like in color to polished brass, and the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude. Daniel was deeply frightened and thought he would faint away. Now, I have come to explain to you what will happen to your people in the future, for the vision concerns a time yet to come. Now, Daniel was told at length of 2 kings of the north and south, their alliances and betrayals and battles, and we're going to skip most of that to note that it sounds a lot like Ezekiel's visions that I explored in a previous program. Daniel was told, at that time, Michael, the great prince who protects your people, will arise. There will be a time of distress, such as has not happened from the beginning of nations until then. So we're looking at the world. But at that time, your people, everyone whose name is found written in the book, will be delivered. Multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt. Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. But you, Daniel, roll up and seal the words of the scroll until the end, the time of the end. Many will go here and there to increase knowledge. Now, who was Michael? I went to William Sears, who is probably the preeminent Bahá'í scholar, or at least one of them, of our times. He is deceased now and was a continental counselor. He wrote the book Thief in the Night, and I think most people in the audience have that book. It's where to begin a study of the Bible, and it's how Sears became a Baha'i. Pages 40 to 43 in that book explain who Michael is. In Sears' opinion, Michael, known as an archangel, but also the great prince, was a pseudonym for Baha'u'llah. And I will simply throw that out there for you. And John, if you could put Sears' Thief in the Night, the page numbers in the chat box, that would be much appreciated. And now it gets very confusing. This vision, wars, wars, wars. A contemptible person arises in the north who prospers in everything, and truth was thrown to the ground. Towards the end, the king of the north is defeated, but his heart will be set against the Holy Covenant. But that king will do as he pleases. He will exalt and magnify himself. I think I'm talking about the king of the south now. He will exalt and magnify himself above every god and will say unheard of things against the God of gods. He will be successful until the time of wrath is completed, for what has been determined must take place. Okay. Then I, Daniel, looked, and there before me stood two others, one on this bank of the river and one on the opposite bank. One of them said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, how long will it be before these astounding things are fulfilled? And I think you can guess what the answer was. The man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, lifted his right hand and his left hand toward heaven, and I heard him swear by him who lives forever, saying, it will be for a time, times, and half a time. When the power of the holy people has been finally broken, all these things will be completed. Okay, let's do the math. A time, times, and half a time. It will come out to 1844 AD. A time is 1 year, 360. 2 times 2 years, 720. Half a time, 180. And these are lunar years. We'll see why in just a minute. And it equals 1,260, which, if you add to 622 AD, comes to 1844 AD. Now, we are working with the Islamic lunar calendar, and this is another nested prophecy about the coming of Islam. And I believe that Daniel was validating Muhammad and Islam as part of this prophecy. Okay, what happened in 622 AD? Muhammad completed the flight from Mecca to Medina, which is called the Hijra. Why was this important? Because he had been terribly persecuted living in Mecca, and his life was in danger. The assassins were after him, and many of his followers had moved to Medina, and his followers in Medina urged him to come to Medina, and he did. And this is what Abdu'l-Baha says about the significance of the Hijra. The departure of Muhammad, the beloved of God, from the city of his birth was the cause of the exaltation of God's holy word, and the banishment of the sacred beauty led to the diffusion of the light of his divine revelation throughout all regions. And this is from selected writings of Abdu'l-Baha. And if you go to this area, there's a lot more about this too. And as for poor Daniel, he's told, go your way, Daniel, because the words are rolled up and sealed until the end of time. They are sealed. The fourth prophecy of hope, the 1,290 years. Now, this is only one sentence, and we can go directly to the math. The 1,290 days comes to 1863 AD. From the time that the daily sacrifice is abolished and the abomination that causes desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. Okay, that is the one sentence that Daniel said. And if you add, again, we're using lunar years for the Islamic calendar, 613 plus 1,290 lunar years comes to 1863. Don't try to do this at home unless you have a lunar and Gregorian calendar conversion. Otherwise, it's not going to work. What happened in 613? That was the year Muhammad declared his station as a prophet of God. And in 1863, Baha'u'llah declared his station as a prophet of God. I love the parallels there. I just love it. It's awesome. And our very last place card for the fifth prophecy, which is also one sentence for 1,335 years, and it is the next to the last or the penultimate verse in the book of Daniel. 1,335 days, you come to 1963. Daniel said, "Blessed is the one who waits for and reaches the end of the 1,335 days." One sentence. Add 628 plus 1,335 solar years. We're back to the Gregorian calendar, and you get 1963 AD. Okay, what happened in 628? That's the year Muhammad signed a treaty with Mecca, with whom he had been at war for a very long time, or I should say had been defending himself against. Muhammad did not go to war. This gave Muhammad complete diplomatic status. It gave him protection. He was free to travel to Mecca, protected. No one was going to assassinate him. Also, Moses, towards the end of his life, made a comment that a prophet like him would be raised up. And I tend to think that the prophet he was talking about was Muhammad, because both Muhammad and Moses were temporal leaders, as well as prophets of God and spiritual leaders. They governed their people as well as nourished them spiritually. And for Daniel, as for you, go your way till the end. You will rest, and then at the end of the days, you will rise to receive your allotted inheritance. And this is the last verse in the book. Now, I put this slide in because I love it. And I'm not going to give an interpretation. I'm going to leave it to you. What does it mean to you? What does the hourglass running out in the hands of the divine in charge mean to you and to the earth? And my final slide, of course, I can't skip this. My trilogy, The Coming of the Glory, Volume 1 and Volume 2. The good news is Volume 3 is on the way. There will be pre-order specials in November, December, in just a couple of months. And if you are interested, you can send in receiving the information, which will include half-price deals and freebies and all sorts of things. You can send an email to marketplace@suplik.com below, or tell Jeremiah you're interested through the chat box, and we'll see that your email addresses are sent to the publishing company for this particular pre-order special. I'm excited, but that's that. 10 years of work coming to an end. Okay, I am going to stop share. I'm going to try to.
You can keep it up if you like as well.
Oh, well, it's gone now.
Okay.
So here I am. What do we have in the Q&A?
There were a few questions. Terry McBride, do you want to voice a few of the questions you have?
Yeah. The first question I was thinking about is okay, the time divisions that we have, for minutes and seconds in the circle, can that be attributed to the prophecy of Daniel as far as our current base 60 system for time and such?
Okay,
mean-
I'm not completely understanding your question. Could you please rephrase it?
Well, okay. Well, I don't know how to rephrase it. I mean, it's just like when you're talking about when Daniel appeared and you had, I guess, certain technology, or I mean, the appearance of, civilization with every manifestation of God,
Mm-hmm.
there is likewise a increase of knowledge.
Yes, yes.
Okay. And prior to, I guess, well, the thing is, according to research, the Babylonians developed the base 60 system, and some people.
Oh, yes. I go into that in my first volume. I cover the rise of Mesopotamia in depth from its in a lot of factors with it. And are you saying the base the 60 system is connected to Daniel?
Well, actually, I was asking you whether or not it's connected to Daniel.
Oh,
I'm asking you. I mean, it's like I don't know if it is. I
okay.
just
Well,
yeah,
I
I'm
don't.
asking you.
I don't know either. So I guess the answer to that is I don't know. Nothing about Daniel would surprise me, but I honestly can't answer that question.
Okay, the other question is, I guess, material, a man will appear, beryl, and my interpretation is that I don't know if is beryl a form of alabaster, or is it related to like minerals like diamonds and rubies and.
It is a mineral in its
Okay.
pure state. It is transparent. However, if there are other minerals mixed with it, it can come in other colors. And one of the things that was really interesting about this vision is it's very, very similar to how Ezekiel saw the glory of the Lord. And so I'm putting out the possibility that the glory of the Lord was speaking directly with Daniel. And of course, I'm not going to argue about that. It's just a possibility, a thought.
Okay. Well, like I said, I don't know. I'm not much of a engineer or anything like that, but I'm looking at a lot of these things. I'm just trying to relate them in my small little brain, trying to see.
Well, you're on here every weekend. I see you for Clearwater,
Okay.
so I suspect your brain is something larger than small, and I appreciate your questions.
Sure, no problem. Thanks.
Thank you, Terry, for sharing your questions with us as well. With that being said, we have one other question. So the subject of today, you said I, Daniel, is the subject of today. And there may have been confusion saying one Daniel. So I, Daniel, that is the way Daniel would repeatedly speak in the Bible, addressing in the Bible, I, Daniel. Can you
Yes.
elaborate again a little more on the importance of this?
I would say it was just a personal idiosyncrasy. All of the prophets had their own unique way of introducing what they were going to say. One of them, maybe it was Ezekiel, always said, "And thus saith the Lord." So I say, "I, Daniel," and then he would go on with a verb. I saw, I heard, I this, I that.
So
Again,
that's interesting, because when someone hears from someone else, that's hearsay. But when you hear, that's not hearsay, it's testifying as witness.
exactly. That's the phrase. He is witnessing himself. He is saying doubly, I, Daniel, saw this. Yes, very good, John, very good.
It's very intriguing. Thank you for the focus on this, the I, Daniel, being the topic of this session, because bearing testimony, there's the tablet, I have to find a name, it's Asla Kula Khair, in English, words of wisdom, I think it says. One of the tablets revealed by Baha'u'llah after the Aqdas, and one of the essence of religion, I'll pull it up, I'll come back with it in a moment. But
Okay.
it talks about bearing testimony. I found that interesting. So while I'm looking for that, there is a question from Joseph Erlacher. It was posted at 11:31 a.m. Joseph, if you'd like to voice that question out loud, you're welcome to do so. I've sent a request to unmute and start your video. You asked about the Umayyad Caliphate and the 10.
Yes, the 10 toes of the
Yes,
figure that were
yes,
smitten by the rock.
yes. This
Okay.
Okay, that's the question. Yes, I love it.
Well, I'm
Keep going.
Abdu'l-Baha talks about the Umayyad Empire,
Mhm. Yes,
and he talks about 10 titular rulers
yes.
of that empire. And he also refers this to the book of Revelation, but
Mhm.
these 10 toes and these 10 titular rulers, there seems to be a correspondence. Do you see any, do you see a correspondence, and beyond that, a reference to the Islamic Empire and its duration of 1260 years?
The short answer is yes. You're a very good example of going beyond and reflecting and coming up with something additional. Yes, the Umayyad Caliphate, I forget, had, I think 13, 14 caliphs, but only 10 names were used among them. And that's what Abdu'l-Baha said. That's where the 10 comes from. And the caliphate, since it was illegitimate, Ali had been designated by Muhammad to be his successor. And instead, someone else was put in. And I think that was called, I forget what the name of that caliphate was, but Ali was not appointed until 25 years later, when it was way too late. And the Umayyad Caliphate, according to everything that I've read, was very corrupt. It also, I mean, religiously corrupt, as well as temporally corrupt, even though it brought a divine springtime. and the Islamic springtime was certainly grand. It took that caliphate immediately after Muhammad died, denied the Islamic faith time to reflect and to mature from within. Instead, it immediately took Islam into militarism, into conquering. And they were like fire going through the Middle East. And I don't know to what extent Islam was spread by the sword. You read various versions of how it might or might not have been. But militarism was definitely not what Muhammad taught. He was into self-defense. And since the last of the Adamic cycle religions, Islam took to militarism so fast, and to empire building and all that went with it. That was like a curse that we're still paying for today. And there are many, many possibilities for the meaning of the desolation. But militarism is certainly one of the biggest problems that Western civilization has been suffering from for centuries. And even though today, supposedly, statistically, the world is at more peace than it has ever been before, at the same time, because of militarism, there are a lot of things that may still happen in the future to the detriment of the whole globe because of what's going on today. And I'm being very careful not to get into today's geopolitics, although I have strong personal opinions. But the desolation and the sanctuary, of course, in the temple that Daniel talked about is religion. And of course, it's Baha'u'llah who came to start cleaning the temple. Well, the Bab actually started cleaning the temple.
So Eileen, as it relates to the previous topic about I, Daniel, and the concept of the words that are written from Daniel serving as testimony. On the fourth sentence or statement, if you will, in Asakul Khair, Words of Wisdom, written by Baha'u'llah, it is stated, the essence of religion is to testify unto that which the Lord hath revealed, and follow that which he hath ordained in his mighty book.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That is the cleansing of the sanctuary. The old religion, as we all know, is abrogated, and the new takes its place. And the Bahá'í Faith has abrogated Islam. And what we see today is the crumbling of the old.
So,
okay, go ahead, John.
So another point you mentioned earlier about this Baha'i interpretation, if you will, of the of Christianity and the transition, of course, in the prophecies. you talked about the body of Christ,
Mhm,
and that Baha'i see it in the spiritual sense. Well, the Bible actually has a few quotes that say the same. And if you look at 1 Corinthians
mhm.
chapter 6, verse 15, it says in the NIV version, "Do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ himself?" And likewise in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 30, NIV, "For we are members of his body and his flesh and of his bones." So the principle of the body of Christ, the resurrection of the body of Christ, that of the believers emerging from this, at the time, non-existence, coming back into existence, the
Mhm.
believers of Jesus rising up and spreading his faith after the crucifixion, that resurrection of the body of Jesus is that of the believers who had really just not been there and appeared again after those 3 days. So something that was interesting, because you had mentioned earlier, I wanted to bring the quotes for those of us who are here in the session to
Mhm.
open up the Bible and take a look at these quotes. So
Thank
it's not
you.
it's not a this versus them. It's not a this interpretation versus that interpretation. It's
Exactly.
that the word, it's open for all of us to read and investigate. Just as Eileen has gone through and investigated, all of us here can follow suit, use the books that she's written, the references that she's provided, and hopefully if you don't have one, you purchase one to help you on your journey. You read these books and see for yourself with your own eyes, just as Daniel, that is a testimony with his own eyes.
Thank you very much, John. I see a question here that I'd like to jump into. Does the gold and silver, etc., imply anything regarding worth? Do we see Mesopotamia as a golden age? Quick, and if SS would like to jump in and say anything while I'm talking, that please feel free. The short answer is no and no, because several times Daniel refers to the smashing of the gold, the silver, the bronze, the iron and clay. Everything is smashed to chaff, smashed to the wind. Therefore, it has no intrinsic value for our lives, because these were not spiritual concepts. These simply represented the various kingdoms, or if you go with Robert Riggs, the various eras of what they represented. And we know that the old world order, which is all of that, is being rolled up, and it all has to go because it has no value. Would you like to comment any further on that? Okay, Ralph Shoemaker. Zoroaster had a theophany of a tree with 7 branches, with each branch having a different metal on it. Interesting. One of the things that I keep running into is a duplication of symbols from prophet to prophet to prophet, from religion to religion to religion, through the sacred scriptures. I think in a sense, our physical world is limited, and so they tend to fall back on the same symbols. And I am not familiar with Zoroastrianism. But the 7 branches, oh, that could have so many meanings. I think in the book of Revelation, it's the 7 churches, and on you go.
I think it's about time for us to start closing out for today. If we have some final words before we finish the presentation.
Oh, this last question from Terry McBride. Was Islamic militarism a response to the First Council of Nicaea? No.
Okay.
It was due to forces working inside Islam on the part of people who had broken the covenant with Muhammad. So the two are not related.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks for the clarification. Thank you.
Okay, John. Time to say goodbye to everybody.
Yes. We thank all of you who have joined us today for this session on I, Daniel. It was a very eye-opening, not to keep making similar sounds here, but it was an eye-opening presentation. And we appreciate that, not just discovering the prophecies together, but we appreciate the other questions that everyone has in their own contribution made today, so that we can enrich the presentation beyond what was originally intended. That being said, there are plenty of other similar presentations you can find that Eileen Maddox has, through time and effort, put together. We welcome you, please, all of you, to go to the Clearwater Baha'is YouTube channel, the Baha'i Center of Clearwater Facebook page, or any other places we found online that we're trying to share these videos. You're welcome to, of course, share with your friends, your family, people you're studying with. We appreciate that as you come through and have questions, that you can reach out to Eileen, of course, through contacting us on Clearwater Baha'is. Post a comment. You may not get as quick an answer, but if you go to clearwaterbaha'is.org and you place a question via clearwaterbaha'is.org, we can try to get back to you a lot sooner. That being said, Eileen's books are available online. You can purchase them on Amazon. Amazon is a very giant company at the moment that's selling a lot of books. And some of the books published via Amazon also are those of Eileen. So just look up the topics, Coming of the Glory, written by Eileen Maddox. You'll find that online, written by her, Eileen Maddox, and published by Something or Other Publishing. You can also go to SOOP's website, SOOP. Can you tell me, Eileen?
Yes, SOOP LLC for Limited Liability Corporation.com. So we call it Souplic.com. SOOP LLC.com. In fact, I'll just put it in the chat real quick.
Well, we appreciate that, Eileen. And all of you here, thank you for joining us once more. We hope you have a beautiful Sunday, and we'll see you again next Sunday at 11 a.m. We'll have another session with another speaker, and we thank all of you. Please check out clearwaterbaha'is.org. Please like this video and subscribe if you're on YouTube and Facebook. We welcome having you join us again.